There is a decision being made right now that will define the next chapter of your story, and tonight I want to prepare your heart for exactly what is coming. My child, the person I have written into your life is standing at a crossroads they have avoided facing directly for a long time, torn between something familiar from their past and the uncertain, unfamiliar possibility of a future with you. Tonight I am telling you plainly that this decision is nearing its conclusion, and the direction it takes will surprise you, though perhaps not in the way you currently expect. You have sensed this tension building for a while now, even if no one has spoken it aloud directly. A hesitation whenever certain topics arise. A loyalty to old patterns, old relationships, old versions of a life that no longer quite fits who they are becoming. You have wondered whether you were competing with something you could not fully see, something rooted deeply enough in their history that it still held influence over decisions in their present. You were not wrong to sense this tension. It has been real, and it has been building toward a resolution for longer than either of you has openly acknowledged. Have you noticed how the hardest decisions someone makes are rarely between something they love and something they do not care about at all? They are almost always between two things that both hold real weight, real history, real meaning, which is exactly what makes the choosing so difficult and so slow to arrive. That is precisely what has been happening here. This is not a simple decision between someone who matters and someone who does not. It is a decision between a familiar past that once meant something significant and a future that requires courage precisely because it is still being built rather than already proven. Both options carry real weight. That is why the deciding has taken this long. You have carried your own quiet insecurity through this uncertain season, wondering whether you could genuinely compete with history, with shared memories, with the safety of something already known. I want to release you from that insecurity tonight. This was never actually a competition measured by history alone. It has always been a decision about direction, about which future actually serves who this person is becoming rather than who they used to be. There is also a particular loneliness in loving someone while sensing that part of their heart remains anchored somewhere else, even when you cannot fully articulate where that anchor is rooted or how deeply it still holds. You have felt that loneliness on ordinary days, in quiet moments, wondering if you would ever be chosen fully rather than shared uncertainly between something old and something new. You have likely noticed the specific moments when this tension becomes most visible, a family gathering where old relationships resurface, a conversation that veers unexpectedly into memories that predate you entirely, a decision about the future that seems to stall the moment it brushes up against something rooted in the past. Each of those moments has cost you something, a small ache you have carried privately, wondering how many more of them would arrive before the underlying tension finally found its resolution. You have also wondered whether bringing up your own concerns directly might come across as insecurity or possessiveness, so you have often stayed quiet instead, absorbing the discomfort rather than naming it clearly. I want you to know tonight that your concerns have never been unreasonable. Sensing an unresolved tension and wanting clarity about where you stand is not possessiveness. It is simply what a heart does when it is genuinely invested in a future it hopes will actually include it. So let me ask you honestly tonight. What would it feel like to know with certainty that this decision, however long it has taken, is finally moving toward its conclusion? There is a specific weariness that comes from loving someone in the middle of their own unresolved process, offering support and patience without fully knowing whether that support will eventually be rewarded with commitment or simply exhausted by continued uncertainty. You have given generously of your patience during this season, more generously than you have always felt equipped to give, and I want you to know tonight that generosity has not gone unnoticed or unrewarded. regardless of which direction this particular decision ultimately takes. You have also likely wondered, in your more difficult moments, whether you have been foolish to wait this long for clarity that has not yet arrived, whether wiser people would have already walked away rather than continuing to hope through this much uncertainty. I want to tell you clearly tonight that your continued hope has not been foolish. It has been rooted in an accurate sense that something significant was genuinely unfolding, even during the seasons it was difficult to see any visible evidence of movement. You have tried to manage this uncertainty in ways that only made your own peace harder to protect. You compared yourself silently to whatever or whoever represents their past, measuring your own worth against a history you may never have witnessed directly, constructing an image in your mind that was likely far more intimidating than the reality actually deserved. You considered giving an ultimatum more than once, demanding clarity before you were willing to continue waiting, only to pull back each time, afraid that forcing the decision prematurely might push them toward the very choice you feared most. You tried convincing yourself you did not care how this resolved, protecting your own heart with a practiced indifference that never actually matched what you were truly feeling underneath it. None of that made you insecure or unreasonable. It made you someone navigating real uncertainty the best way you knew how, doing your best to protect your own heart while still holding space for a future you genuinely hoped would include you. Some of you researched details about their past that were never freely offered to you, piecing together a fuller picture through social media, mutual friends, or offhand comments, trying to understand exactly what you were up against so you could better prepare yourself for whatever the outcome might be. That instinct to gather information is understandable, though it rarely provided the peace you were hoping it would, because information alone cannot resolve a decision that ultimately depends on someone else's heart and someone else's choice. Others of you tried overcompensating, becoming more accommodating, more agreeable, more careful not to create any friction that might tip the decision in the wrong direction. That instinct, too, comes from a place of genuine care, though it often costs more than it gains, because a decision made under pressure to please rarely produces the same lasting clarity as a decision made freely, from genuine conviction rather than external persuasion. There were nights, too, when you considered simply walking away first, protecting yourself from a rejection you feared might be coming, choosing to release your own grip before it could be taken from you by someone else's decision. That instinct to protect yourself preemptively is completely understandable, though I want you to know tonight that walking away prematurely would have cost you the exact resolution that has already been quietly moving in your favor. A few of you tried a different approach entirely, throwing yourself completely into other areas of life, work, friendships, personal growth, in an effort to make yourself so fulfilled independently that the outcome of this particular decision would no longer hold so much weight over your emotional well-being. That approach carries genuine wisdom in it, and much of the strength you have built through that effort will serve you well regardless of how this particular situation resolves. But I also want to acknowledge honestly that no amount of independent fulfillment fully erases the specific ache of caring deeply about someone whose own decision remains genuinely uncertain, and there is no shame in still feeling that particular ache even while doing everything right to build a full life around it. Consider a young widow who chose loyalty over comfort, released by her mother-in-law to return to her own people, to the familiar past that would have required no risk, no uncertainty, nothing but a return to what she already knew. Instead, she made a decision that shocked everyone who witnessed it, choosing an uncertain, foreign future over the safety of everything familiar, declaring that wherever the journey led, she would go, and where it ended, she would remain. That decision, made against every reasonable expectation, became the very choice that led her directly into the exact story that had been prepared for her, a story far better than the familiar past she could have easily chosen instead. Whatever decision is being weighed in this connection right now carries that same shape. Choosing the unfamiliar future over the familiar past requires a courage that surprises everyone who witnesses it, and it often leads somewhere far better than the comfortable option ever could have. Notice, too, that her decision was not made lightly or impulsively. She had time to consider the easier path, time to weigh the comfort of returning to everything familiar against the uncertainty of committing to something entirely new. Her mother-in-law even urged her directly to reconsider, to take the safer, more sensible option that everyone would have understood and respected. She heard that counsel, considered it fully, and still chose differently, not out of impulsiveness but out of a settled conviction that the future she was choosing, however uncertain, was actually where she belonged. Whatever decision is currently being weighed in your own story has likely gone through that same process, counsel considered, comfort weighed carefully against uncertainty, before arriving at whatever conclusion is now approaching. A decision that takes this long to make is rarely a careless one. It is usually the sign of someone taking the choice seriously enough to consider it from every possible angle before finally settling on an answer. What has felt uncertain about this choice was never uncertain because the outcome had already been decided against you. Consider also a man called to leave everything familiar behind, his country, his relatives, his father's entire household, in exchange for a promise he could not yet see fulfilled, a future built entirely on trust rather than on anything already established or proven. Leaving that familiar household was not simple or without cost. It required setting aside generations of belonging, of identity, of safety built through everything he had always known, in exchange for an uncertain journey toward something he had only been promised, never yet shown. And yet he went, choosing the uncertain promise over the comfortable, familiar past, and that choice became the foundation of an entire legacy that outlasted anything the familiar household could have offered him. Whatever familiar household of habit, memory, or old identity is currently competing with the future being offered in your own story, know that choosing the uncertain promise over the comfortable past has never been evidence of foolishness. It has always been the shape genuine faith takes when someone finally trusts something they cannot yet fully see over something they have always been able to hold on to easily. There is a story of a tax collector despised by his own community, sitting at his post, entirely entrenched in a life and an identity everyone around him had already written him off as being permanently attached to. When he was given the chance to follow a different path entirely, he did not hesitate for long. He left everything behind immediately, choosing an uncertain future over an established, profitable, familiar past, shocking everyone who had assumed his identity was permanently fixed to what he had always been. His choice was decisive, immediate, and completely unexpected by everyone who thought they knew exactly who he was. Sometimes the person everyone assumes is anchored permanently to their past surprises everyone, including themselves, with how quickly and how completely they are able to choose something entirely different once the moment of decision actually arrives. His entire community had spent years watching him, categorizing him, deciding they already understood exactly who he was and exactly what he valued. None of them anticipated how quickly that identity could be set aside the moment something better was offered clearly and directly to him. The very people who assumed his past had permanent hold over him were the ones most shocked by how little it actually took for him to walk away from it entirely, once he was given a genuine reason worth choosing instead. If people around the person connected to your story have made similar assumptions, deciding they already understand what will win out in this decision, do not let their certainty become your own certainty as well. They are working from limited information, from an outside perspective that cannot fully account for what has been happening internally, quietly, in a heart that may be far closer to a completely different decision than anyone watching from the outside currently realizes. Something is going to become clear very soon that neither of you has been able to fully control up to this point. Picture it exactly as it may unfold. A conversation happens where old ties are finally addressed directly, named plainly instead of avoided, and a decision is spoken aloud that neither of you had been certain would ever actually be made. Or an action speaks before words do, a choice made visibly, undeniably, that settles the question without requiring lengthy explanation. Or simply, over a short period of time, you notice the old anchor beginning to loosen its hold, replaced gradually by a steadiness and a presence that was not fully available to you before. You will recognize the genuine resolution by the peace that follows it, both in them and eventually in you. A decision made with real clarity tends to settle rather than create new tension, even if the immediate adjustment period requires some time to fully process. It may come through a direct conversation where they finally name the tension you have both been sensing, explaining clearly what has been weighed and what has finally been decided. It may come through a visible change in how they engage with reminders of the past, less frequent contact, less emotional weight given to old memories, a gradual redirection of attention and energy toward the future being built with you instead. It may even come through a single, decisive action, something unmistakable that settles the question without requiring lengthy explanation, a choice made visibly rather than simply discussed privately. Sometimes the resolution arrives more gradually than a single dramatic conversation would suggest, unfolding over several weeks rather than a single defining moment. If that is the shape it takes in your story, do not mistake gradual change for lack of genuine decision. Some choices, once made internally, take time to fully express themselves outwardly, and the gradual unfolding is not evidence of continued uncertainty but simply the natural pace at which real change tends to become visible. When this resolution comes, whichever direction it moves, receive it with grace. If it moves toward you, receive that choice fully, without needing to punish them for how long it took to arrive at it. If it does not move in the direction you hoped, trust that you were never meant to compete for a place that required constant convincing to hold. I know you have wondered whether this decision would ever actually be made, whether the uncertainty would simply continue indefinitely without resolution. I am telling you tonight, before it happens, that the resolution is closer than it has ever been, and it will likely surprise you. Return with me to the beginning of this word, to the tension you have sensed building for a while now, even without anyone speaking it aloud directly. Remember how real that tension has always felt, even without a clear picture yet of exactly what it involved. Here is the sentence I want you to hold on to long after tonight ends. What has been weighed for so long is finally being decided, and the decision will surprise everyone who assumed they already knew how it would end. Say that back to yourself the next time doubt tries to convince you that nothing will ever change. What has been weighed for so long is finally being decided, and the outcome is closer than it has ever been. Write that sentence somewhere you will see it during these final days of waiting, if that helps you hold on to it more easily. Speak it quietly to yourself the next time comparison or insecurity tries to creep back into your thinking. What has been weighed for so long is finally being decided, and the outcome is closer than it has ever been. That sentence remains true regardless of exactly which day the resolution finally becomes visible to you. Your part now is simply to remain steady, trusting the process rather than trying to force or predict its exact timing. Of everything that has occupied your thoughts recently, this particular uncertainty has likely taken up more space than almost anything else, and that is not a coincidence either. The significance you have sensed in this decision has been accurate the entire time, even during the moments you wondered whether you were overthinking something that might not actually matter as much as it felt like it did. If this word reached the exact place in you that has quietly wondered whether you could compete with someone else's past, let that be known, even if only in the quiet of your own heart right now. Someone else you know may be standing in their own season of uncertain waiting tonight, wondering whether they will be chosen over someone or something from another person's history, and they may need this word too, so let them come to mind gently. Heavenly Father, I bring this beloved child before you exactly as they are tonight, carrying real uncertainty about a decision they cannot control or accelerate, sensing that resolution is close without yet knowing which direction it will take. I ask for clarity to come soon, and for peace to accompany them fully through whatever remains of this waiting. Give them discernment to recognize genuine resolution when it finally arrives, distinguishing it clearly from temporary reassurance that does not actually reflect a settled decision. Protect them from being pulled back into false hope by gestures that sound significant but do not actually resolve the underlying tension. Give the person making this decision the courage to choose clearly and to communicate that choice honestly, rather than allowing the uncertainty to continue indefinitely out of fear or avoidance. Let whatever ties still hold them to their past be examined honestly, and let whatever no longer serves who they are becoming be released completely. Heal whatever insecurity this season of uncertainty has created in this beloved child, the quiet comparison to a history they may never fully understand, the fear that they are simply not enough to compete with what has already been established. Replace that insecurity with a settled confidence in their own worth, entirely separate from the outcome of this particular decision. If this connection is the one you have written into their story, let the decision move clearly and completely in that direction, with nothing from the past left unresolved to quietly undermine what is being chosen. Let old ties release fully, so nothing lingers to complicate what is being built now. If this connection is not meant to continue, give this beloved child the strength and the self-respect to release it with grace, trusting that the same faithfulness guiding this decision is also preparing something better suited to who they actually are and what they genuinely deserve. If they have been silently comparing themselves to whoever or whatever represents the past in this situation, replace that comparison with a settled knowledge of their own unique worth, entirely unrelated to anyone or anything that came before them. If the person making this decision is struggling with guilt over the time this process has taken, release them from that guilt quickly enough that it does not delay the resolution any further than necessary. If family loyalty, shared history, or ongoing practical ties to the past make full separation genuinely complicated rather than simply a matter of preference, give wisdom for navigating that complexity honestly, in a way that respects everyone involved while still allowing the future to move forward clearly. If this beloved child has old wounds from previous relationships where they were not ultimately chosen, where someone they loved eventually returned to a past relationship or old pattern instead of choosing a future with them, heal those wounds completely tonight so this new situation is not filtered entirely through old fear and old disappointment. Let them approach this waiting with fresh hope rather than the residue of previous heartbreak. Give this beloved child discernment for how to carry themselves during these final days of uncertainty, neither withdrawing so completely that connection is lost, nor clinging so tightly that pressure replaces the natural unfolding of a genuine decision. Let grace and steadiness mark how they wait, regardless of how many more days remain before full clarity arrives. Protect their peace from imagined worst-case scenarios that have no basis in the actual truth of what is unfolding. Let them rest in what has genuinely been shown to them through their own accurate instincts, rather than surrendering to fear that invents outcomes no evidence actually supports. Surround this beloved child with wise, steady people during this season, friends and family who can offer genuine perspective rather than either false reassurance or unnecessary alarm. Let the voices closest to them speak truth gently, in ways that strengthen rather than destabilize their peace while they wait. Give them wisdom for how to receive whatever this decision ultimately reveals, so that regardless of the outcome, they are able to respond in a way that honors both their own dignity and the genuine complexity of what the other person has been navigating. Let them neither minimize the difficulty of this decision for the other person nor allow that difficulty to excuse continued uncertainty beyond what is genuinely necessary. If the resolution moves in their favor, give them the grace to welcome this person fully into the new future being built together, without requiring them to prove their commitment repeatedly or continuously relitigate the season of uncertainty that came before this resolution. Let forgiveness and welcome mark the beginning of this next chapter, rather than lingering suspicion about a decision that has already genuinely been settled. If the resolution does not move in the direction this beloved child hoped, comfort them deeply in the disappointment that will naturally follow, and give them enough perspective to recognize, even in the pain of that moment, that not being chosen by someone still working through unresolved attachment to their past has protected them from a future built on unstable ground. Let that disappointment, however real, eventually become the doorway towards something built on a foundation that does not require ongoing competition with anyone or anything else. Watch over their heart in these final days before resolution, Father. Let sleep come easily despite the uncertainty, let daily tasks be completed with focus despite the waiting, and let joy remain accessible in ordinary moments even while something significant continues resolving quietly in the background of their life. Someone reading or listening to this tonight may want to leave the name of who they are believing for in the comments, without needing to explain every detail, so others navigating this same uncertain waiting can pray in agreement with them. Give them patience for whatever remains unclear, and protect their peace from anxious comparison or imagined scenarios that have no basis in the actual truth of the situation. Let them rest in what has genuinely been shown to them, rather than what fear invents in the absence of full certainty. Restore their confidence in their own instincts, which have sensed this tension building accurately this entire time, even without complete information to fully confirm it. Let them trust that their own perception has not failed them throughout this season of waiting. Let this entire season, once it is fully resolved, become a story of growth for this beloved child regardless of the outcome, a testimony to their own capacity for patience, self-respect, and steady hope even in the middle of genuine uncertainty. Let whatever they have learned about themselves during this waiting remain with them long after the resolution itself has been settled, becoming part of the foundation for whatever future actually unfolds for them, whether that future includes this particular connection or leads them somewhere else entirely. If there have been moments during this season when they doubted their own worth, wondering whether they were simply not compelling enough to inspire a faster or clearer decision, release them completely from that particular lie tonight. The speed of someone else's decision-making process has never been an accurate measurement of another person's worth. Some hearts simply require more time to work through genuine complexity, and that timeline reflects the complexity of their own process, not any deficiency in the person waiting for them to complete it. Thank you for meeting this beloved child exactly here, exactly now, standing at the edge of a decision that is finally moving toward its resolution, closer than they currently realize. In the mighty and precious name of Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen.